October 29th, 2006. Laura asks about the white cats who were my friends. Laura asked when I stopped seeing the white cats. This photo was taken later of Babylon on his cat tower, and it shows one of the large white cat sculptures in the background. I never knew anything about wildcats as a kid. I could not have told a bobcat from a cheetah. The cats were not really white so much as they were almost hard to look at, like white light. Their shape was very much like the shape of a cougar, but as a child I would not have known that. They were not shaped like cats, but that's how I referred to them. They were the size of Shadow to me as a child, so probably the size of Catrina in reality. So Shadow was a really big 260-pound cougar, and Catrina was like maybe a 110-pound cougar. But I was using cats that she knew at the time to give her references to how large these cats appeared to me. They didn't have names, and while their voices were distinctly different, they shared a unison that is hard, even now, for me to explain. I always heard their two voices, and still do. That part never left me. Their voices have always been like two people saying the same thing in two different ways. They always agree with each other, and I am usually the one trying to argue some other perspective. But they are always right. A case in point. When Hercules, the snow leopard, and Armani and Jumanji, the leopards, were all about a year old, which would be about circa 1998, I had a limo that was like they haul old folks around town in. On one side of the bus, I had installed stainless steel cages, and on the other side of the bus were seats, and we were on our way to a TV station to do an on-air appearance. Jamie and Daniel, her boyfriend, and I were going as the handler for each of the three cats. Daniel was in the back of the bus, holding Armani in his lap. Jamie may have had Jumanji out, but I don't recall, and Hercules was in the cage. I was coming down the off-ramp and heard the first voice say, "Hold on tight." Immediately, the second voice expanded on that and said, "Hold on tight and no one's going to get hurt." And then my voice saying silently, "What are you guys talking about? There isn't anyone around us. What could possibly..." There was an explosion, like a bomb going off in the back. I looked into the rearview mirror, and all I could see inside the van was smoke. The bus lurched to one side, and it was all I could do to keep it from flipping over. I wrestled it off the road and into a field. Jamie was already freeing Hercules and leashing him up with Jumanji on the lead in her other hand. The smoke was too thick to get to the back of the bus, so I ran around the bus on the outside to the back door. When I opened it, Daniel was sitting perfectly still, staring straight ahead. Armani was slumped in his arms and not moving. Both of them and the entire back of the bus were sprayed with blood. There was a hole in the side of the bus ripping all the way under the floor where Daniel's feet had been resting so that the ground could be seen beneath his dangling feet. I didn't know if there was a fire in the bus because of the smoke, so I grabbed Daniel, who had a death grip on Armani, and hurled them out of and away from the van. Jamie had Jumanji and Hercules a good distance from the bus, and Daniel was starting to show some sign of life. We all thought that Armani was dead. She still hadn't moved. Jamie and I got everyone into the shade as it was a blazing hot day. Armani slowly regained. I paused because it's hard to say what she regained. It was as if she regained consciousness, but I don't know that she was unconscious so much as scared stiff, and the same seemed to be true of Daniel. Apparently, both of the tires on the back right had blown at the same time, and the force of the radial tires exploding into the fiberglass shell of the van had sent millions of tiny shards of metal and fiberglass across Daniel, and it appeared that all of the blood sprayed all over the van and the cat was his, but he wasn't bleeding anymore. The smoke was from the rubber on the pavement. The voices were right. No one got hurt. From the future, Lenore Infante says this was probably as we were driving down for the Naples morning show at her local station. She said one of the cats peed on the set. I remember Hercules bounding around like a pinball on a leash backstage, having the time of his life. This was a dramatic example, but very typical of the way they are always speaking, almost over each other, but clearly and always in agreement. As for seeing them, I don't remember seeing them as clearly as I did up until I was 12 or so, with fleeting exceptions. Because their form is one of light and not hard boundaries, I have often felt that I have seen them fleetingly as an adult, but not like when they were my constant companions as a child. I always feel their presence, and never lost that, and have always heard them throughout the day. When I walked into Cane's a few years ago and saw them across the room, my first reaction was one of non-reaction, as if it was perfectly normal to glimpse them, and then I noticed how rigid their form, and that is when I decided, no matter what, I had to take those statues home, because they looked exactly like what I had always seen. When I see them, I usually just greet them as, "Hey guys," and when I speak with them, I always refer to them as "you guys," but there is no sense of male or femaleness. And until you asked me about it the other day, I never even thought about them having names. In retrospect, I guess it is because I think of names as labels that separate us, and I tend not to think of spirits as separate. It's either that or my excuse for not remembering people's names. Later I sent this. Jamie is such a private person that I rarely know what is going on in her head. As you know from her Mayan calendar description, she controls information as part of her way of feeling safe. Like all kids, she obviously conversed with those that were unseen to others, but she wasn't about to let anyone in on the conversations. What was unusual about her is that everything had to be white. Her walls were white, her clothes were white, all, and I mean all, of the toys she selected were white. The white crayon was the first one to be used up. White crayons on white paper didn't bother her a bit. She was always able to manipulate her environment. Lights on and off from her crib, and most chilling to both her father and I were the music boxes. He had a dozen or so ceramic clowns that were music boxes, and they would play all of the time without any assistance from us if she was alone in her crib. We always thought that the place was haunted, but it didn't matter where we moved, and it wasn't until much later that I realized all the stuff that I moved, without intending to, was mirrored in Jamie. Speaking of moving things, I was at a reception for a candidate a few weeks ago, and a woman across the room said to me, knowing my past about the fur farms, that her coat was already dead when she bought it, so it wasn't her fault. She and the two women next to her saw the tongs on the table behind me come flying at her, and as they caught my attention from the corner of my eye, they flipped in mid-air and flew under the table that they had launched from. I thought a cat must have jumped onto the table and caused the tongs to go flying, and asked if there had been a cat on the table, and one of the women said, "No, they just sort of leaped out into the air on their own." This woman is someone I have to be nice to, so I quickly changed the subject and got her talking about herself, and she seemed to forget all about being attacked by tongs. But the other two women left, and I didn't see them again all night. Laura wrote me back saying, "My dear Carole, you and I are so much alike. It is the Reed energy, I know. It is very strong spiritual energy that can make anything happen. Thank you for sharing the story with me. I appreciate it. I am still laughing about the tongs. It's a great visual. I have to be really aware when I get angry or things still fly. That was an interesting comment by that woman about her coat already being dead, so it wasn't her fault. I assume it not to be her fault that the animals were killed before she bought it. I am writing this one down for another perspective on an article. When I first met Jamie, or saw her before I knew who she was, the energy around her was white, almost to the degree of being translucent. By being silent, as much as she is, she keeps it really pure and strong. I know her feelings are very deep, and she's probably misunderstood by a lot of people. She has so much potential energy, and will definitely be a force to be reckoned with in the future. We need a strong feminine energy, and Jamie has a strong healing energy that will only continue to grow. Thanks again for sharing. Feel free to share anytime, as I forget most people can't or don't remember how to do this, and it would freak people out.